Ask the Podcast Coach for November 19th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there, the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you, and happy pre-Black Friday Saturday all week long. And really, isn't Black Friday the whole year? Isn't like
It
were you
seems
getting
that
like
way.
Black Friday in July?
Well, remember when Amazon had like Prime special,
yeah, Prime Day,
like double
I think they had
secret probation sale?
two Prime Days. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. Well, it's
And
the height of consumerism and capitalism here in the United States. God bless capitalism. Woohoo!
that's it. And every time you turn, I'm already getting like our Black Friday sale yesterday. So
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Friday, I was getting our Friday sale is live. And I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
and I was in Walmart last weekend, and they had, first of all, you're stepping over all the giant large screen TVs that are
Oh, yeah.
everywhere.
Everywhere.
And I was like, wait, Black Friday isn't for like another 2 weeks. What's the deal? But they're like, nope.
Started in June. we're here for you. So it's
Yeah.
there are, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later. There
Well-
are maybe some things folks are waiting for.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe a new coffee maker.
Yeah, maybe no, I love my old one, but I could look for a Black Friday special. How about you help me out here?
Some sort of new Keurig machine. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need new artwork, or if you're a brand new podcaster and you just need artwork, really, Mark is the guy you want to go with. I have a member of the School of Podcasting that is doing a Santa Claus podcast. Santa Says, I believe, is the name of it. And he went to Mark, and the minute he showed me his artwork, I said, "That's Mark, isn't it?" He goes, "Yep." And I go, "It just looked amazing." So if you need artwork, if you need a lead magnet, if you need a whole new website, if you want to see Mark's work in action on a website, go over to congressionaldish.com. He did that for Jen Briney. And Mark sits down with you one-on-one to figure out what your show is about. He's going to listen to it. He's going to talk to you to kind of get your vibe so that everything is in alignment with your brand, from your artwork to your website to just the whole vibe of the show, so that it doesn't jar your audience. So if you want to look good, because remember, they see you before they hear you, check out podcastbranding.co.
Take me home.
Of course, big thanks to our friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. His most recent episode 216, Pirates of the Caribbean. Surprise, not totally factual. The movie, not totally. As I got a chance to listen to that. And you might want to too, if you're looking for something to listen, because the holidays are coming up and maybe you need a new podcast or something to fill in some time. Give it a listen, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And if anybody is listening to this later and you go, wait, why is my computer notifying me? It's not your computer, it's mine. And I have since turned that off because I
didn't hear it.
Sitting here and just hearing bring, bring. And I'm like, what is like? I don't have my.
I think we're okay. I think we're okay.
So, yeah, I think you threw out a great question. We'll throw it to the chat room. What are you hoping goes on sale for Black Friday?
Yeah. What's Santa need to bring to the house that you're going to buy? Obviously, right?
Yeah,
you're not going to make your family buy you podcasting equipment. Just go buy it. Make sure you keep the receipts for tax time. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm pretty much set. I think I have a sickness in that I keep buying courses. So now I have Neil Patel, which is free. Go to neilpatel.com/training. He's got a bunch of courses. So I'm going through his SEO. I have one on copywriting from Neil Headley, who's been a guest on the show. I just bought Storyworthy, which is one of my favorite books on storytelling. Matthew Dix has put that out. It's storytelling for business. And I was looking at that last night and like going, A, when am I going to find the time to go through all those? And B,
right,
it takes some time to put those into action as well. And so I have I'm just doing what I'm doing with Spanish. I spend about 15 minutes a day learning a couple new Spanish words, and I'm just like, when that's done, I'm gonna go over and do one lesson in one of those and just move it along. But
Well, the end
Jim,
of the year, Dave, may be a good time to stack those up, right? If you've got
yeah,
some holiday time and you're doing something different, we often set goals and do new things for the year, looking at 2023. It's hard to believe we're saying that already.
yeah,
This year has flown by, right? But that strategy for you may work out as far as just having some extra time, little chunks at a time, implementing things. I think that's probably the best way to implement stuff in your podcast, anyways, is a little bit and test it, little bit and test it, little bit and test it. Don't be in too much of a hurry. You do
yeah,
too many things, too many SEOs, too many different things. You don't know what you did that changed anything, right?
yeah,
So kind of, put it in, measure it, uh, figure it out,
yeah.
come back to it, try it again, some of those kinds of things.
Well, what I've done is I've made a folder in my browser that just says learn stuff. And then, like right now, I'm going through copywriting stuff. And I was like, I need to do one course. Don't do a lesson here. And because then it's pushing 12 peanuts, a half an inch. Whereas if I just
Yeah.
grab one
Yeah.
course and just keep hammering that, that'll go through there. But it's the other thing that I thought we might talk about is because well, you just mentioned, holiday time. I am gonna blow through. I have the weirdest but best situation is my family, most of my family goes to Florida for Christmas because that's where their in-laws are. And so we end up having Christmas like December 10th. So I have Christmas. It's just not on December 25th. And so what happens then is the rest of the world like takes off because they're doing the holiday. I've already had my holiday. And so I can just blow through stuff because everybody else is busy opening up their presents. And I'm like, yep, did that about a week and a half ago. I'm done. And so that gives me some free time. But do you consider 2022 done? Like, is it with the holidays and stuff? Is this
Yeah.
just one of those where you kind of go, yeah, put a fork in it?
I think for most things, you can't have, I mean, we're recording this November 19th, right?
Yeah.
2022. For most people, anything you do now, probably, I mean, we're close. It's coming up, Christmas, Thanksgiving here in the United States. Yeah, I think I haven't, there's nothing I could do right now or I want to do right now that'll necessarily that I have to do in these months that would have an impact in these months. I think everything I'm thinking about is, we spent some time last week talking about why I'm struggling with my podcast a little bit, but everything I do now is probably, I'm thinking like first or second quarter of next year.
Yeah.
That's just the way I'm thinking about it. I'm not doing any small things that would probably have an effect here towards the end of the year. I know some folks are. I mean, this is for some podcasts. So this is the time when consumers buy, right? And so they might be selling things, or maybe an opportunity to offer Black Friday deals of your own stuff, or there may be opportunities, the merch that you have going out. They'll make great Christmas gifts. And so there may be some opportunities of some marketing. If you're not doing some marketing, you could be doing right now to drive some of those sales.
Yeah, GR says it feels like the world kind of shuts down in a way, but between Thanksgiving all the way through the first Monday of January. Yeah, that's kind
Yeah,
of
a little
true.
bit. Sort
Um,
of. I mean, certainly we're doing more things together. And so I don't think for everybody it does. I think for some, it's the sun is shining. It's time to make hay. You know?
Uncle Marv says it's Black Friday season. That's it.
Exactly. Now
That is.
that's accurate. Yes, that is accurate.
Does Gallup do any kind of, you know, discounts or anything like that on any of their stuff?
Sometimes we do. Yeah, we're not a big Black Friday company. We just don't do a lot of
Yeah.
that. Last year, I think we did something. This year, I don't think we're going to. So we don't. That's it's a little bit out of our space, so in some
Yeah.
regard, to do those kinds of things. But no, so we don't. End of the year for us gets real quiet. We kind of wind things down, and then everybody kind of takes that week off in between Christmas and New Year.
Yeah.
That's really when it gets quiet, like really quiet.
Yeah.
And we did some acquisitions early in the year that are done, and I don't have to worry about. Thank goodness they didn't pick January 1. Everybody wants to pick that January 1 date. That's a horrible date. Stop picking that day. The 15th is fine of January, but don't pick January 1. So I'm kind of looking forward to this. And Coach Dave mentions, the season that's coming up ahead of this is ahead of it is tax season.
Yeah.
At least here in the United States, we're going to be in the thick of it here before you know it. Right now, let me tell you, right now would be a great time to start pulling receipts. What did I do during the year? What can I write off? The tax codes are changing almost daily here in the US, it feels like. So make sure you're up to date on what you can and can't do and have a plan, especially if you're spending significant amount of money on your podcast. Have a plan to write some of those off. Get a tax consultant if you don't know how to do it, find somebody who does, right?
Yeah, I that's something I want to, and that's actually the other thing I thought we could talk about is if we're kind of considering 2022 is like, all right, probably not going to do any big changes, but I asked in the School of Podcasting group, I'm like, all right, what's one thing you're going to be working on in 2023 in regards to your podcast? And so like somebody spit out, all right, in terms of download numbers, I'd like to get up to 5,000 downloads a month. Other people. So Jim, do you have anything in 2023? You might be like, I might do this with my podcast.
Yeah, you coached me last week. We had a whole a whole section where both the chat and you kind of coached me on my podcast. I think I came to the conclusion this week. What I really liked about this is Home Gadget Geeks. This is my tech show that I do on Thursday nights. Is it used to help people. Like I did it to help people, much like this show. This is why I don't struggle with Ask the Podcast Coach, because we get to answer questions. It's relevant. We're helping people. Home Gadget Geeks kind of settled into just an interview kind of thing. I was having other folks, and that's okay. But I just had lost I think when I was talking with Dave Hamilton over at Mac Geek Gab the other day, he said most of his podcast runs off of the audience questions. And I was like, yeah, I don't get any questions. Of course, I don't ask for any questions. And like I think I'd lost touch with the audience. And so this Thursday, I just canceled the show and did an open call and said, hey, if you want to come talk to me, let's do this thing. And that kind of helped me cement in like, yeah, I kind of did this to help people and I'm not really helping people. So I think in 2023, again, I probably won't just change this next week,
Right.
but begin to morph the podcast back.
Turn the rudder.
Yeah, just slowly start like, okay, how do I start having some influence on? By the way, when I think about that, I get really excited. I'm like, yeah, that's it. Okay, got it. Figured it out. Lost my way a little bit on it. Let's get back to helping people and let's get boots on the ground, as they say, to start helping people with their technology problems.
That can really put a lot of, gas in your tank when you see that you're helping people. That's for at least for me, that's always been a big motivator of that. So we actually have somebody on Wisdom looking to come in.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Elizabeth is going to come up. So I'm glad I put this where I can see it. I looked up, I was like, oh, because remember last week
maybe
I figured
for
it out.
2023, our resolution be like watch Wisdom more.
Wisdom a little more. Yeah. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the show. What can we help you with?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be able to request to come in. I'm sitting here listening to both of you, and I'm hearing you talk about the holidays and your marketing strategies. I'm a health and wellness coach. I've been doing it for 4 years. And as you know, those beginning years, you're learning, you're taking in knowledge, you're figuring out your brand, you're going through all of. And then the pandemic hit, which, I didn't know, none of us knew was going to happen. And when you're a coach and you love people and you are used to speaking to people, the pandemic can make that very hard because now we're wearing masks and we're isolating. And so it made it very difficult for me to get new clients, or it made it difficult to keep clients because the pandemic hurt so many people financially that they couldn't afford a coach. So my question, because I am new to the podcasting world and I do create content on all of the social media platforms, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok. And I never used to be into that, but my team encouraged me to do that. And because they felt like in order for people to know what type of coach I am and what I offer, they need to see me, they need to hear me. So my question is, since starting the podcast, I noticed that I've been very open about my mental health challenges, which is what I often help people with, because there's more than one ways to take care of your mental health challenges other than a prescription medication. You can look at who you're hanging out with, how much sleep you're getting, what you're putting into your body. And that was my intention across all of my social media platforms. But since discovering wisdom, I've noticed I'm doing something much different. I'm being much more authentic and honest about my mental health challenges. So my question is, when you're having a brand, when you are saying you're a mental health coach, how much should you be sharing personally? For one, because the two can get blended, and then I don't want to scare off potential clients, because when I'm speaking about my mental health challenges, most often they're from the past and how I've come to have the voice I have now. So
Nice.
clearly I've grown. But at the same time, what prompted me to ask this question is yesterday I did the open poetry. There was an open mic, and I shared a poem that was very, to me, dark, because that was the place I was in when I wrote it. But also, it was very, very honest. And I would hate for anyone to hear that and say, I don't know if I want to work with her because she had those such dark thoughts. So how do you separate when you feel like you want to be yourself? I want to be a coach that I can guide and lead my clients to discovering how powerful they are,
Right.
and understanding how much fear can be involved with making any changes, but without scaring them, by being very open and honest about what I had to go through. Does that impact the people that possibly want to work with me? How much is too honest when you
Jim, you're muted.
are the face?
Yeah. I'm trying to answer that question, and then I'm muted as we're doing that. Elizabeth, I think it's a
Oh, okay.
really
I'm
good.
so sorry.
No worries. It's on our end. It's a really good question that spans beyond the mental health world when we think about podcasters and the things they share, right? I mean, and it's important in the mental health world, and we have to disclose. Dave and I are not doctors. We don't have a degree. We're not therapists. We didn't even stay at Holiday Inn Express last night, so we're not any of those things. But when you talk about sharing those things that make you vulnerable, right? There's no right answer on this one, because you just don't know how the audience will respond. In some vulnerable moments, it may open the door to have a significant conversation with somebody who's really struggling in that area. It may trigger others, right? And so this is the hard part about it, is the how much should I share there's no definable, like,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, and if people do, I'd be really, really careful with their advice on this. There's no right answer on how much should I.
Yeah. I think,
Go ahead, Dave.
well, for me, vulnerability is, and you have to be careful, because I think some people, like, they just open up the mic and like just start bleeding. And I'm like, no, you don't want to use it as a marketing approach. But I know I did an episode once where I was kind of like you were talking, like the mental challenges of podcasting. And like right now, the other day, there's a stat called listen notes. And there are people that are putting it on their website going, look, I'm in the top 1%. And I keep going, that's a bogus stat. It's a horrible stat. And what's killing me is I have people go, yeah, I don't care. I'm still going to use it. And that, I find that depressing, that I'm finding people that are somewhat kind of like, and it just, so I did an episode once kind of on that thing. And it was weird because it really, I just want to let people know that what you hear on a microphone is not always the actual, like, you're not getting all of me. You're getting me doing a presentation on podcasting. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. And I had a lot of people say, man, that was a great episode, because we just hear you talking about the good side of podcasting. And I was kind of like, well, here's some of the stuff that I struggle with. And I understand your question, because you want to be, this icon that people can lean on. And you're worried that if you show, a crack in the armor, that, like you said, they might go, I don't know if she wants to be my coach. But on the other hand, I think when you show that you're human, and like you said, I love the way you put it, I'm talking about things I thought in the past, and here's how I overcame them. Well, now that's a lesson. So I kind of like that idea. But I'm with Jim. I don't know if there's I always say be careful what you talk about on the internet because it writes in ink. So I always say be careful talking about, partners or family members or things like that, because they didn't ask to be in the podcast in some cases.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm always very careful about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good answer from we're like, well, you got to
No.
kind of figure it out, but I think sometimes you do.
No, absolutely. And it was very helpful because it's a big world, and there are so many people in the world with so many different personalities and in ways that they grew up and things they adapted to or they inherited. And so they have their own belief system. So I think it's what you helped me realize, it will either resonate with some people and they say, you know what, that's the kind of coach I want to work with because I want to be honest with myself. And she's clearly being honest with herself. And so I could get those people. And then I could possibly, every coach is not for everyone, just like every friend is not necessarily for you, just because y'all, and, so that definitely helped. I will say before my time is up, after I finished that poem that I had never read to anyone, I called a business partner that I used to work with in a different business I started before. And I read the poem to him, and his question, he's a smart guy. He's a marketing guy. He's been doing marketing for a while. He's very talented. I trust him. I can be vulnerable with him. And I read it, and he took a pause and said, who heard this? How many people were listening? And I said, I think there were like 78 people listening. And I said, and I did get 10 new followers. So that may be good, huh? Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm trying to figure out how accessible what you shared will be found. And I said, well, it wasn't on my podcast. I was joining someone else's. He said, good, then maybe it'll get lost in the tunnels. And I said, why? Because what I shared was bad? And he said, no, it's the truth. I know you. So that was the truth. Yeah. But this is too much for me to think about right now because it was kind of late. And so he said, we'll talk about it. But he did make me feel, that's what made me wake up this morning and say, uh-oh, did I overshare?
I see.
Based on his.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth, feel free to come back in. Wisdom gives you a time limit for some reason. So I did not kick you out. Wisdom did that automatically. I'll be happy to bring you back up. Jay, and for anyone listening on Wisdom, we're also on at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. So we have a YouTube thing going as well. So feel free to listen wherever you're at or watch. But Jay in our chat room said, if someone holds whatever you shared against you, they're not right for you. And you made a great point in that. I would say in a way, maybe the barometer, I guess, is to be yourself. If it feels natural, I guess, in a way, because like Daniel J. Lewis is a good friend of mine, and Daniel is much geekier than I say that with love, much geekier, he gets into the technical details and goes deep. That's his style. And I am much more like, hey, here's what you need to know, and so it's a different style. And Daniel and I have both had people go, yeah, I tried to listen to the other guy, meaning Daniel had guys listening to me and I had guys listening to Daniel. And they're like, yeah, that guy's not for me. Like Dave's too goofy. And other people said, yeah, Daniel's a little too dry for me. And so that is something that, I did a thing in my last episode that I got off on a tangent, and I did it on purpose because I was having fun. And that was, I started talking about Up With People because I was getting like PTSD from the 70s because I was saying if we all create perfectly safe content, we'll turn podcasting into Up With People. And Up With People was really boring back in the 70s. And I was surprised to hear they actually did stuff in the 90s. So maybe that's something, And I when I listened back to it, I was like, yeah, Dave, you're not really talking about, you're talking about podcasting, and let's not make it too safe, because safe can be really boring. I was like, but you could say this quicker. You could cut this down. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm having fun. And I'm glad I did that, because I had like 5 people, which, if you're new to podcasting, getting any kind of feedback is always amazing. When you have 5 people on the same episode go, dude, that was so funny, I was laughing along, because they were, older like me. And that's why I did it. I knew the people that knew Up With People were going to laugh and have a good time and it'd be entertaining. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna leave that in there. So,
Dave, I think we dance this fine line when we're vulnerable, right? When we're out there saying it, and sometimes it's appropriate, and sometimes it's too much, right?
yeah,
And that line is so thin; it's razor thin, and it's hard to know for sure if you did it. In Elizabeth's case, she's feeling a little vulnerable this morning, right? She
Yeah.
said that the person said, well, Dave, it looks like maybe Elizabeth's back, so we can.
She's back. Yeah.
Yeah. We can, but Elizabeth, it sounds like you're feeling a little vulnerable this morning. In that there's a little bit of, when you think about oversharing, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome in there. Like, should I have been saying that? Do I have the right to say that? Was it too much? How's it going to land on people? Well, guess what? You said it. So it's out there, right? It's been released to the internet, right? It's going to land well for some and maybe not land well for others. And that's the consequences of what we do on these microphones. Whenever we put ourselves out there, right? Dave and I do this every week, and there's some weeks I get done and I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, or, maybe we shouldn't have done that. And I think those are just the byproducts of what we do. And you have to be able to, I think, say, well, okay, it worked for me, may not have worked for others. I'm going to continue to go on because I feel like it was the right thing to do. The point, or the backside of that, is if you evaluate it and you go, I shouldn't have done that, be okay with that, and then change some things in the future so you don't put yourself in that same situation again. Right.
Yeah. And you also don't beat yourself up, because that's
not too much.
Yeah.
Not too much. I do think there's some valid, like when you do something wrong, I think there's a moment where you should go, like, ooh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, that remorse, I think, helps us not do it again. I think it fuels better performance, but certainly don't let it debilitate you. Don't let it become to a point where it's stopping you from continuing to do good things. Right.
And I would also, before you make any huge changes on assumptions, see if what you said actually impacted somebody in the way you don't want to. When I was a musician, I had a singer that was somewhat famous for always making a start just a little late, and it drove me bonkers, because I was ready to start right on time. And then it dawned on me, we never had a bar owner, or wherever we were playing, nobody ever complained, hey, you guys went on 5 minutes late. And I was like, okay, so it's bothering me, but in the end, it's not really impacting anyone negatively. It's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It bothered me that we were going on late, but in the end, it wasn't really affecting anybody. So if you say something and you're like, not sure if I should have said that, well, let's see if it offended anybody first before we go doing an apology.
True. Yeah, right on. Elizabeth, do you want to respond to that? Any of that?
Yes. All of this is very helpful. You're right. It is out there. And just because it's out there and I feel vulnerable today, I am, as being a health and wellness coach, I often tell people to take some time to figure out what they feel in their body. And I noticed for me, it was a very vulnerable feeling. But not a feeling of regret, because I feel like every choice we make, just because I did one podcast where I was very open, I have the opportunity to do other podcasts. And so they're going to see other sides of me and as well. So what I hope is that they take all of it. If someone is really working on themselves, they're going to take into account all of these different aspects. It doesn't stop. If you're really researching, you don't just go to one website and pick that first coach that pops up. What do? You read, you comb through, you look up reviews, you look up other websites, you see which one, you compare, okay, which coach do I see myself working with? And then you set that discovery call or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess for me on my Instagram, which is where I have my biggest following, I write all of my content. And even though it's written from me, I still have it on my screen when I'm recording what I wrote so that I could stay on track and focus, but also say it in a natural way. Because even though I wrote it, I don't have it memorized, right? So I'm practicing and practicing before I hit record on the camera. And I have found on Instagram, when I go back and look at all of my videos, they all seem so much the same. Like I'm this, hi friends, like I'm this happy person. Today I'm going to give you a tip. And I think that's great. But I also want to show people the other side of me, that I'm not a robot, right? Like
Sure.
I'm not like, yes, let's say yes to mental health challenges, because sometimes for some people it is hard. They don't feel like that. And so I do think if I can balance it, like you were saying, it's a very, very fine line.
Yeah,
If I can figure out where line through playing and discovering, and because I'm still in that phase, just because you have so many followers, it doesn't mean that turns into an ROI. How many of those followers are engaging? How many of those, you never want to get stuck on those numbers, which is why I am just trying to focus on what my why is. Why am I making this video? Why why did I pursue this career? And when I get to the why, then passion is created. Then I'm like, oh, I'm doing it because of this, and this, and that's where my passion comes from. So I'm always wanting to be honest, but again, that fine line, how much is too honest?
Sure. What's
like
what's your website?
My website is currently down, which is a whole nother issue, but I'm at kiglifecoach.com. You can look me up on Twitter. Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. I like to write a lot of quotes that I've written, or quotes that come, famous quotes. So my Pinterest is doing great. My Instagram is doing great. I haven't paid too much attention to TikTok because I was focusing on the that had the most growth. And for me right now, that's Instagram. So my videos are very planned. I'm dressed a certain way intentionally. I set up my background intentionally. I know what herbs I want behind me. That's all intentional.
Got it. Well, did you have any other questions? Because we got Russ in the wings here.
Oh, no, that was it. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a great question.
And listen, I think it's Russ, hang tight for 1 second. I think it's the struggle. I mean, she's, Dave, deeply struggling with what I think a lot of podcasters struggle with, right? We put ourselves out there and then we go, oh, like, was that the right thing to do? Was that enough? I mean, I think deep inside we all have that struggle, and I think good on her for talking about it. Like, I think sometimes we don't have anybody to talk to. I think if you're a podcaster and you're struggling with this, find somebody to talk to.
Well, and especially when in her, I think she's life and health, and I was like, half of when I did my weight loss show, half of that was about mental health. Yeah, because that's a lot of times that's why you're running to the fridge, is because you hate yourself.
Physician, heal thyself, right? I mean, in that regard, right? But it's a very vulnerable spot. I think we all struggle with it. I don't want to minimize that. I think we all struggle with it. So, anyways, Elizabeth, thanks for calling in.
And we've brought Russ in here on at YouTube, and again, we're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live, or in the case of Russ, he just jumped in at askthepodcastcoach.com/join if you want to ask your question that way. But if you're like, Jim, do you remember Russ had this lovely little project he was going to work on?
10 Russ, you had 10 interviews that didn't work. There was a power problem, right? Is that the
Yeah.
Did I summarize that appropriately, Russ?
Yeah, just about. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Flying in the face of your best advice and my best judgment, I decided to go ahead with the 10-person roundtable podcast.
Yeah.
The first time I set everything up, I thought I was so slick, and I had everything all, tested at home, set it all up, got it there, and it didn't work at all.
Right.
You and I, we talked a couple weeks ago, and you thought that possibly, as I did, that the power to all the equipment was the problem. I brought in the Jackery power supply, like we discussed. Everything lit up. Everything worked perfectly. I couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you, and the reason I bring this up is like it solved it. I set it up just like you said at home with the Jackery and everything, and it's like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I got it there, set it all up just like I said, and I noticed that the power from the wall was not able to fill the Jackery power supply as fast as the equipment I had could drain it. So with it plugged into the wall, and it's got a 16 watt, it's a 16 watt charge rate, right? It crept down from 100% down to about 90 by the time I was done. So basically the bucket was emptying faster than it was being filled by the power from the wall. And so I think they have a problem, but I didn't, and it solved everything. I just wanted to share that with your listeners. That it was just like bitching. It worked, and they were so impressed.
Russ, maybe not a bad idea. I've never thought about like doing remote recordings and having your own power supply, so to speak. How much that Jackery? How much did that cost you? What was remember the retail on that thing?
I think it was like 2 or 3 beans. Sorry, $200 or $300. It was like right off of Amazon, and it really, I use it because I go record out in the park,
right?
Because it's a public place, and frankly, the reverb when you don't have any room around you is zero. So that's a nice added. But but it worked great.
Not a terribly expensive backup to have, and it worked for you. So like I've never really talked about having a battery in the front of all this in a podcasting studio to make sure that power's a little bit different too. I think it may even be a little cleaner. But
I'll bet.
Let's how'd the interview go? Like, did it, like we advised you against 10 people doing it all at once. Did you got that done? How did it go?
Well, first of all, the ladies were incredibly nice. I had 9 people total, and on my L12 mixer, there's only 8 XLR spots, right? So to give you a little bit of gear update, I had a Sterling headphone mixer, so I could put that out to everybody, plus a headphone splitter, so everybody could have headphones. I had SMBs all hooked up to cloud lifters. Wow. I had with a headset where it had a boom mic because the lady was blind and I didn't want her to miss the mic. So I got that set up with her, and I had one podcast. Rode. Is it the big black one, the big Procaster? Is that the?
Probably.
Yeah, they're big podcasting mic, and I'll tell you, if you haven't hooked that one up to a cloud lifter yet, oh my God, the difference is huge. Nice. It doesn't need it, but it makes a huge difference. So I got everybody headphoned, everybody mic'd, and the ladies were so nice. They really did not talk over one another at all. Not appreciably. I mean, there's background noise and all that.
Right.
And with the L12 into Hindenburg, because it's, what is it, ASIO?
Yeah.
You get 12 channels. You get nice. 12 channels plus 2 that make up for stereo. So I could see everything as it was happening and what bleed there was. So I'm going to have to do it by hand. I think it would probably melt my computer if I try to do it with isotope, do all the debleed, I mean.
Well, yeah, you could do, Waves has, I think it's NS1, which is basically just a noise gate. But yeah, that would take a while because it's going to, when you export that bad boy, that's the thing I've noticed. The more plugins you add, when you go to export, you're like, wait, it's only, I just ate my whole lunch and it's only 30% done. It's like, oops.
Oh no!
So-
And on Isotope, some of the like the de-reverb and the de-bleed,
Yeah.
I basically set it up. I go to bed and I set the alarm for a couple hours later, and it's still crunching away. So no, it actually, so the cooperation of the people made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, like that's the X factor is the people. Like if they're talking over each other, if they're having bad mic technique, if they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, right? All that stuff is really hard to get out in post. So the cleaner the people are, oftentimes the better it is. Hopefully you don't have somebody attacking you from behind right now, Russ.
Oh yeah, you heard that right.
I
No,
did.
the only worry I had was I had one microphone, a Rode NT2A, which is a condenser. Because one of the ladies was not really able to sit up close to the table. She's got some, she's kind of in a wheelchair. Anyway, but the point being is that she couldn't get right up on the mic like you guys are.
Right.
So I set up the condenser mic for her to share with somebody. And although it's pretty directional, you have to turn it a little bit to pick people up right away. She could be easily 3 feet away and you could hear her like it was right in your ear.
Good.
So that worked out.
Sounds like it went well. I mean, I think you could probably talk about the details of all the things that anytime you have 10 people, right, go on forever. But I mean, it does sound like it worked were you happy? Were you happy with the end result of the audio that you got from them? Is it going to work out?
Yeah, I've listened to most of it on the track by track on Hindenburg.
Oh,
and well, and some of them I have to boost up a little bit, and some of them I have to clean up a little bit. The only real complaint I had that is nobody's fault, but one of the SM7Bs had a slight bit of a pickup from, and I'm going to say 60 hertz from the fluorescent lights.
Oh yeah.
And before and I'll just take that out with Isotope, but the trick was apparently getting a better cable. I tried a few things and I really had to get going with the interview. So we had the hum in the background, but then before I left, I swapped the cables with some others I brought and it went right away. So those cables are in the trash.
Russ, before you did all that work of individual, I'm not a big fan of like individual tracks. I just am not, right? So I'll come at it from that perspective.
Go ahead.
Any thoughts of just dropping that into Audacity into Auphonic and like letting it like make a first run at it to see if it could bring the levels up for you and clean up some of those things without having to go into Isotope and do individual tracks?
Well, there wasn't one until you just suggested it. Auphonic. Well, I don't use Auphonic. I use Hindenburg.
Right.
I also have Descript, and my thought was before I go too crazy, is to drop the master track into Descript and let the studio sound. Do its magic.
With Descript level and stuff, Dave, is that you're more familiar with that than I am.
It cleans it up, and then when you export it, it goes, what do you want to export? And I just say peak, and it basically acts as a level later then. So it's pretty slick.
Yeah.
And they're the newest version of Descript just came out of beta. So and their CEO did an announcements where they're part of some AI thing that gets funding, and they're hoping to get millions of dollars, et cetera, and that whole 9 yards. So,
well, Descript has an update about every 5 minutes, really.
Yeah.
Every time I log on to it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, get off, get back on.
Dave wants to know is this public yet, or is this going to be a private thing?
Oh no, it'll be public. I just have to finish it, and I will. Okay. It's gonna probably be. Before next weekend, be ready is my plan, and I can let you know about it then. Would that be fair?
Cool. Where will you post it?
Well, it'll be on my podcast, if I may.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't know. My podcast is called Claremont Speaks, and it's a hyper local podcast about people, events, issues, politics, whatever, in my little shire of Claremont, which is about 50 miles east of LA.
And what's your website?
ClaremontSpeaks.com.
That's the right choice in my book. Very
and
good.
I used, per your recommendation, Podpage.
Nice. Good
And
work.
I think the guy at Podpage got a little mad at me. I think, he was like, "Hey, I need all kinds of feedback." So I gave him like 20 questions, and he
Mm.
told me, "Why don't you go check into WordPress?"
Well, there are
And
times,
I'm like, "Wait a minute, really? I'm trying to help you out here."
well, it's he has every product has like, this is what we do, this is who our target audience is. It's like we had a guy that gave us literally 2 pages of things he wanted to see on Ask the Podcast Coach, and we're like, "Why?" And I mean, it was detailed, like, "Hey, on last March at the 3-minute mark on episode blah blah blah, you did this. I think we should do this." And we didn't really implement hardly any of his suggestions because he wanted to steer the show in a way that we don't want to go. And it's like, so there's a name for that person. Again, we appreciate the feedback, but you're not our target audience. This is kind of what we do. So if you try to steer a product kind of out of the path where they want to go or what they're doing for, it's not that he doesn't appreciate your feedback. He's just like, yeah, that's not what we do. And if you need more flexibility, then go see WordPress. Yeah, I totally get
And they
that.
were just, and I felt bad because I was really just making suggestions,
Yeah.
trying to be constructive, not like, "Hey, why don't you do this?" It's just like, "Hey, here, this would be helpful," or
Yeah.
what have you. And I just said, what you have is good. I was just hoping that maybe
It would
you
do
took
other
some of
stuff
these
too.
and make it even better. That's all. I stuck with
Well,
it.
yeah. Better for you. May not be, the coding may not be better for him, right? From that
Well, that's okay.
standpoint.
But I mean,
Well, that's why he was saying, like, hey,
but he asked
well,
for
we're
feedback and I gave it to him. So there you go.
no, right
Yeah.
on.
It's his it's his deal. Do it if you don't. I'll use Podpage for all the other ones that I'm going to
Yeah.
do too. So
Yeah.
that's fine.
Anything else we can help you with?
I had 2 other quick questions. Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully that was of value to your listeners.
Yeah.
I've listened to some of the tech shows. DBX 286S. It's a mic preamp.
Yeah, got one in my closet.
Okay, well then that tells me how useful you find it.
Well, I use the Shep's Omni-Channel plugin from Waze, which does work with Hindenburg, and it does everything the DBX does. It's a noise gate, it's a compressor, it's got 2 de-essers built into it, and I want to say it's, I don't know, $50-$60, and it doesn't take up part of my desk. I mean, I love the DBX, don't get me wrong, it was a great thing, but I found this plugin and I was like, oh, surely it can't be wait, hold on, wait, it does this and that. And if I wanted to, I could even make myself sound like 9 Inch Nails and distort my voice, but I've yet to find a use for that one. But yeah, I'm not against it. It took up part of my desk, and found this plugin, and I was like, now on one hand, right, I don't sound as good live as I used to because I don't have, the big bottom going on here, but I'm going through a Rodecaster which has it built in. So for me, again, I don't need it because I've got a Rodecaster. Dan in the chat room says I used to use a DBX 286. It was useful when I lived next to the Air Force Base. I only stopped using it because the storm killed it. Yeah, that'll do it. I have a
because it says it takes out room noise.
What a noise gate, like right now my furnace is on, and when I shut up you don't hear it because I have a noise gate. So a noise gate just says, look, you have to be at least this loud to get through to the microphone. But in room noise, like if I put my microphone away and talk louder, it doesn't remove that kind of room noise. But it's
you can't make bad audio better with a
DBX.
Piece of equipment. Yeah. Like you got to have really good audio to start with. Yeah, I mean, you can do some trickery and clean some stuff up, but it's best to have the best possible audio going in first, and then enhance it with some of those kinds of things. So it won't remove room echo. Like that's just
reverb.
Right. I mean, listen, there's ways to do that, but let's just fix the room.
Right.
Yeah.
If we can.
Well, on the 10-person roundtable deal, it was in a stone-walled basement.
Yeah.
Which and they were nice enough to turn off the HVAC, so that did walk on it, but there was still a little bit of the noise, and I thought, okay, And the other thing is that apparently that trying to get 4 more microphones out of an L12 by going into the banana plug ones, Zoom says do not plug microphones into those. And I was thinking that the EBX could make that possible. And they said, no, no, those are for instruments like guitars and what have you.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
So if I may ask one last final question,
Sure,
and I'll get off.
Yeah.
Jim, I think last week you talked about doing podcasts for corporate internal use.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, we do that. We do that from time to time.
And I kind of think that approaching the regular businesses that in my little burg here to do podcasts, it just isn't working. They don't get it.
Yeah, they don't.
The group of ladies that I'm trying to help, they get it. They're after it 100%. They're very excited. But the usual retail guy just doesn't care. Now, my thought is, though, I've looked at a couple things, talked to people that do it for like a big medical group or some type of spread out organization where it's like a charity or something like that. And I just wondered, and I'll get off and listen to your answer. Is there anything you can offer me on like the approach on how to find folks that would be interested in this? And then second, what the pitch could be?
Yeah. I have both. You can either hang tight or if you want to drop
All
off,
right.
you can, but
I'll wait.
Okay. So I think the pitch is, I think it works best in situations where the communication is dispersed, right? I mean, you got people all around the globe, or you've got them in different locations, or you're in a situation where you need to have one person or a group of people communicate with everybody in a way that isn't like a town hall. You can have these town hall meetings, call them whatever you want, all hands meetings, whatever you want to call them. When I was working for this company, 20 years ago now, and our all hands meetings were super expensive. Like they'd bring everybody together for 4 hours sometimes. And that information they would put out in an all hands meeting could have been a podcast. And they could have run that downstream to everybody and said, hey, in fact, at one point, this was pre-iPhone days when we were talking about it. I said, buy an iPod for everybody. And then if 4 times a year you do the all hands communication stuff via the podcast, those will pay for the podcast for the iPods. Well,
so basically it's a financial break even that you reach really quick.
Yeah. You start thinking about the expense of that. Hey, we'll give you an iPod. You listen to these all hands meetings on your way home or walking the dog, whatever, right? Recoup that time that you're doing something else and work when we need you to work, right? Type deal. If you do a dollars and cents of dollars per hour and you get a kind of a standard labor rate for that across an organization, that's pretty easy to justify pretty quick. The question is, most executives just have a hard time seeing that for whatever reason. They just kind of go, nah, I just want them there. I just want to talk to them, or I just want to send, I just want to do it the way I'm used to doing it. And they're afraid that audio is going to get out. School's out. They're afraid that audio is going to get out and it's going to land somewhere, and that's what they don't want. So that's a big struggle to get it done that way.
But for an internal thing, they would have a password to get into it, right?
In theory, yeah. And there's lots of great ways. Today, there's way more ways to do that than there was, 10 years ago.
Oh, big time.
Because the thought was to have them do, instead of a memo, instead of an email, instead of a Zoom call, most of what everybody's interested in probably can be covered, like you said, in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the time of a commute.
Well, Russ, here's the deal, though. Not every executive has a podcast. These things are different than just talking in front of people sometimes, and they get really weird. You put them in a microphone and they get really weird, and I hear you. So, Dave.
I mean, my first job out of college, I was a copier technician, and we would have technicians and sales guys driving 45 minutes to the office because it was in Canton, and I was coming from Akron. We had people coming from way down south, blah, 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 to get in there and say, we need to do more service calls. We need to up our number of that. We need to up the number of this. And I'm like going, at the time I was like, if we had a podcast back then, because this was before podcasting was around, those people could have been listening to hey, go win one for the Gipper speech on their way to the first call.
Right.
and it's like we would have been more productive,
Yeah.
but we just wasted, because that was 45 minutes one way. So there's
Right.
an hour and a half out of the day. I'm in the car listening to somebody go, be more productive. Well, I could have been more productive if I wasn't driving to the office. So,
And of course, in Akron, that's 9 months out of the year. Then 3 months it's snow, and oh my God, so it's even longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you're right. A lot of people don't get it. I was at a medical conference and it was for internet marketing. And I was talking to a woman and I said, she's like, yeah, we're just, at this point, it's kind of coming down to who can service their, we're trying to focus on bedside manner because everything is so digital. And I said, oh, you should start a podcast. And she goes, I would love a podcast. She goes, but my boss absolutely hates podcasts. I go, well, like, what do you mean? She said, and I quote, we will never do a podcast. And I go, why? She goes, she just hates them. So you're going to run into those people like that heard the 3 Guys 1 Brain show and they think that's what podcasting is. And I even said, but look, yours will stand out even more because you're going to do it right. And they're like, nope, I'm just here to tell you, you say the word podcast, my boss vomits instantly. And I was like, all right. So there are those people that aren't going to get it. And, many people at this conference were like, hey, we've done it this way forever. It's working. We don't want to add anything new.
Yeah.
So,
Russ, you got to try though. You got to try.
Yeah.
And just ask and just say, hey, look, it can save time and money, and they'll say yes or no.
Yeah.
But don't self, and I know you're not gonna, but this is to everybody else. Don't you say no, because then you don't know for sure. Make the pitch and then let them decide.
All right. Well, very cool, guys. Thank you for the advice and for listening. I hope I added some value to your listeners, and I'll let you know when the 10 people roundtable is up and ready.
Yeah,
cool.
Come back and we'll drop it in chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Russ.
Cool. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, great talking to you. You too.
And
I love the school bell behind. I was like, oh, it's time for recess. Is it recess time? I think it is recess time.
I have a tape of me and my grandma playing radio. It was WHOME. And she said, what are your favorite studies? And I go, what are studies? And she goes, like your classes and stuff. And I go, oh, recess. And she goes, recess is your favorite study? And I go, yeah. She goes, yeah, that's my favorite too. So funny, man. I'm like 5 years old. But so before I forget, I want to take a second to say thanks to our awesome supporters. And I wrote somebody down. I picked a random person. Do you remember who I said?
Ed?
Ed.
Yeah.
Ed from soniccupcake.com. So if you are looking for an editor or need some help, go check out Ed at soniccupcake.com. The whole recording. Yeah. So thank you, Ed, for being an awesome supporter. And we mentioned Podpage earlier. If you'd like to try Podpage, go over to trypodpage.com. If you want to learn Podpage for free, go to learnpodpage.com. And of course, if you want more Jim Cullison, and who doesn't, go over to theaverageguy.tv and check out Home Gadget Geeks. And if you're thinking of starting a podcast, well, if you wanted to start a podcast in January, like today would be the day you wanted to really get it going. But that doesn't mean if you're listening to this in December, you missed the boat. But when you think podcasting, go to schoolofpodcasting.com, use the coupon code ASK, and that will save on your either 30 or monthly. Yeah, your monthly or yearly subscription. And for more information, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And there was one person that was waiting on Wisdom, and I see where they are no longer waiting. If you're like, hey, no lines right now, you can always, and how you do that, we're live on YouTube. So you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. You can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, just like Russ did, and jump right into the video. And for the record, if you're listening on Wisdom, Russ had his camera off because we do realize it's Saturday morning. Maybe, you're in your jammies. And of course, on Wisdom, if you're watching, just click the little plus sign underneath my blinking head, and that will bring you in. So,
does Wisdom have is it a 10-minute limit?
It has a 10-minute limit. I think I can adjust that.
Which is not always bad, right?
Right.
Knowing you're up against, I think that helps you kind of go like, okay, I better get to the point on this thing if I'm going to be up here. I think that's probably why they do it on Wisdom, is to kind of keep, because, the two of us could talk for 90 minutes without without a
Right.
break, no problem. So other people can too. And so I think that just that kind of keeps things. So like Uncle Marv says, phone lines are open.
Yeah.
Remember when we used to do the phone?
I remember that. Dude, I found, I don't know where it was, but I ended up clicking on I was in my YouTube channel and it was Ask the Podcast Coach from 2014.
Really? Have we been doing it?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
geez.
it was my voice was higher.
Yeah.
And because I'm looking and I'm like, wait, what office am I in? I'm okay, I'm in Cleveland, and it
Your
was
Cleveland office? Like
I was in my
was it
Cleveland, yeah.
so was
I
it
had a
did you have the
white
banner?
I had a
behind?
white background behind me. It was completely I had like one of those fold out green screens, but it was white.
Mhm.
And I was talking into a 2100 and I was just like, look at, and both of our hairs were a little
A
darker.
little darker. You
Yeah.
grade faster than me for sure.
And my face was much thinner. And I was
Yeah.
just like, wow, if we've been doing it that long. And
We
like,
have. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been good. There are some we kind of started the show talking about Black Friday deals
Yeah.
and right now if you're listening, if you're the AT 2005 is the inexpensive way to go from the Audio Technica side of things, 59, but coming in at $58. These are US dollars. Is a Samsung Q2U. So maybe maybe an aspiring podcaster friend needs a Christmas gift.
Yeah.
There's also Amazon's got a lot of deals where you can get you get some headphones or some other things associated with get a boom arm. In Russ's situation, folks that were in a wheelchair can't get the mic to them. Maybe taking a boom arm or two with you that's got the table clamp to it might be one of
Right.
those things where you go in live. I
Or
bought
duct
some
tape,
of those.
right?
Duct tape works. Hey, whatever
it-
gets it done. Nobody sees it.
Somebody's in a wheelchair, little duct tape, you straight up. Wait, that
Don't
would
go
not be
there, Dave.
good.
Don't go
That
there,
would be
Dave.
bad.
Don't go there, Dave. So the
Speaking of things you regret after you say
you're
it.
like, oh, I would pull that one back. But I used to I'd buy some of those inexpensive boom arms that they
Yeah.
didn't sound the greatest. They had the springs on the outside,
Yeah.
but for live and local, they work great because you weren't moving them around that much, right? Just get that mic to that person that might be farther away from the mic. So lots of different ways. I think over the next couple weeks, there's some great opportunities to pick up some of these deals on some things that you may not have in your podcasting arsenal, especially if you're doing local and live. You want to have some gear to take with you. So there you go.
I really do need to empty my closet though, because Sweetwater has a thing where you can sell
Yeah, that's a
your
great way to
stuff,
do it.
and they take a small percentage if you take the cash, or you keep 100% of the sale if you get it in Sweetwater credit. And I was like, ooh, that's
Yeah, why wouldn't you take the credit on that one?
yeah. It's like, 'cause
I mean,
know I'm gonna buy.
they're competitive. Will they match Amazon? Do you
They
know?
pretty much do. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I've never had to. Every time I go over there, they're the same price, same free shipping. And are you noticing this? I order something on Amazon Prime. It'll be like, okay, you can have it in basically 2 days, right? Free shipping, 2 day. And I'm getting this more and more, and I'm sure with the holidays I'll get it, kind of understandably. But the whole like, hey, I ordered on Wednesday, you'll have it by Friday, and then and Jim's thirsty. There we go. And all of a sudden Friday turns to Saturday and Saturday turns to Sunday. And I'm like, wait, I thought one of the biggest things I got Prime for was free quick shipping. And I'm like, and it's not that it's not in stock. It just seems like it's taking longer for Amazon to get things to me. And I'm like, because it's only going to get worse with the holidays.
They're only getting busier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I've turned on notifications. If you get stuff the old way, FedEx or UPS, they now have really good tracking systems too. Like, I mean, my UPS guy was actually early yesterday. Like the notification said between 4:15 and 6:15, and it came at like 3, and I was like, great. So
wow.
yeah. Hey, Dan, I think Dan Lefebvre had a question out there earlier. Dave will need to get his nerd on for this one. Go ahead and read it, Dave.
Yeah, it says, can you export a wave at 48, hertz or whatever it is from Descript with a higher paid plan, or is it always only a M4A? I'm going to try to do this here, but the fun part is Descript needs like 8 terabytes of open space on your computer. I mean, it needs a lot of space. Now, my computer, we talked about this, I think it was last week, that I'm kind of starting to feel like it's time for a new computer. And part of it is my hard drive is almost always full. I'm constantly having to clear it out. And
I know this guy that could help you with that, by the way. He's really
Yeah.
good at computer stuff. He's got a gadget podcast that he
Yeah.
like get his nerd on about that kind of
Well,
stuff. So
Well, I looked at all right, so let's in fact I can share my screen, I
and I think
believe
the heart of Dan's question is in the
the
with
48.
the higher plan, the higher paid plan. Yeah, I think that was the heart of the question there.
So if I go to my brain is just turned to mush. Here we go. So here's the script. And I can't remember if this want to try to script storyboard. I thought it was in okay, hold on. Let me find this is always great in the audio version. All right. So if I think this was one of the old ones and it's quick, so it should open. My answer is I don't know, to be honest with you. I just know when you go to share, I can say I want to export an audio wave.
Which plan are you on?
Here, Sam. I'm just on $30 a month, whatever the plan that is. But I did see an option here. I don't know why it wigged out on me. Sample rate. Yeah, I can export it 48. So, it's always tricky though, because they always have this thing where you go, I want to share, and they give you a bunch of stuff you don't want. I'm like, wait, I want to export.
Well, somebody wanted it. This is always the problem, going back to Russ's, feedback. Sometimes or companies listen to all the feedback that they get, and then now they have 8,000 options, right? To do things with. And
wow, I almost left my own thing. I went to hit stop and I hit leave studio, and it's like, are you sure you want to do that? And I'm like, no, I do not.
That's that one time that prompt actually pays off, because most of the time you're like, of course I want to leave. It's why I'm clicking the button, right? Yeah.
I did see kind of a trend.
He's on the free plan, by the way. He said, good. He says, good to know I'm using their free plan. So I had a feeling that's why I wasn't seeing it. So very, very possible, right? That upgrade. What's the next? Is there an upgrade? Is there a next upgrade? Or are you at the first paid level? Do you know?
I think I'm on the lowest paid level that there is.
And that's 30 a month?
Yeah, 30 a month. And that's the whole, I will put this in the chat room.
For Russ's sake, we were talking about dropping his file either into Descript or dropping it into, I said Auphonic. I think I'm on I buy the web version, and I think I'm at like $11 a month and I get like 7 hours.
Yeah.
And that's good enough for me. And I think there's some, Russ, if you haven't tried, I think Auphonic has a trial. You give it,
they give you X amount of hours.
Yeah.
So the only thing I always have, I usually will run things through a noise gate first before I run it through Auphonic, because I am found so many times where it increases a breath. It thinks a breath is a word. And I was like, is there a setting that I can say, don't boost things? Because that's what it's meant to do, is level things out. And I'm like, but all of a sudden, there's a talking. I'm like, it's a guy out of.
It's painful. Yes.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, if you want to check out Descript, supportthishow.com/Descript is my affiliate link. So we'll just throw that out there. But I did see the kind of a trend where people are starting to overthink again. And I think this is, for me, this is like podcasting season. Like, this is where people start to think about it, and they want to do it in January and that whole 9 yards. So I start to see an uptick. And then in February, there's usually a huge cliff where everybody who thought they were going to start a podcast decided it's not worth it. But things like, is it a good choice to start my first podcast episode with a guest? And I was like, and in true fashion, the answer is, well, it depends. Why are you starting your podcast? If the goal is to position yourself as an expert, no, probably don't start with a guest, because you're going to position them as the expert, unless you want to do the Jerry Springer at the end and go, what did we learn today? This one time, that kind of thing. So it always comes back to, why are you doing this podcast, and what is the goal? I was, again, going back, it's kind of fun sometimes to go back and listen to old episodes. And at the end of, not so much the thing I was talking about, but an older episode of another show, and I think I had 7 calls to action. I was like, wow, if I was coaching me, I'd be like, yeah, figure out what you want to do. And, can we narrow that down to maybe 2? 1 would be great, but like 2, or do the website sandwich where you go, you can sign up for our newsletter, you can become an awesome supporter, you can blah, blah, blah. It's all there. AskThePodcastCoach.com. And then you kind of say it at the beginning and then you say it at the end. So you have one call to action. But
I think if your call to actions are consistent, if you word them the same, if you're saying them each week, I think get 3 or 4 in there and it's just fine. Listen, I've been listening to podcasts before and they'll do a call to action. And this is a podcast I might have been listening to for 6 months and I'll go, I just need to do that. Like the marketing does work over time when I'm in a situation and I'm ready to accept that CTA. And if there was just one CTA, I may have missed the boat on that. And it's like, yeah, I do need to sign up for the newsletter, or yeah, I do need to go do this thing. So we differ a little bit on this, but my own philosophy and what we've seen play out in the Gallup podcasts is make them quick. You don't want 2-minute CTAs,
right?
Or you don't want 8 2-minute CTAs. But I think if you're quick and concise and you're saying them in the same way each time, I think you get a couple more in there. So that's just my thoughts. And I would script them. Yes, I would. DR says, sorry. Can you do your CTAs on a scripted intro or outro? Totally, you can. I script them, so I do live reads, but they're scripted. So, and I say them the same way all the time. That's the way I like to do them. You figure out what works best for you on that. You can do anything that you want, but figure out what works best for you and your audience in that. But that's what I say.
Yeah, it's I know there have been times when I do and we have somebody on Wisdom coming up in just a second. When I do any kind of ad reads or things like that, I always have to write it out because otherwise I look up and I'm like, wow, I just did a 2-minute 30-second ad. I'm like, that's not going to work.
Right.
Scripting them will definitely help. So we're going to bring up, I'm waiting for their name to pop up. I think it was D Grant. So I'm not sure if we call you Grant or D or whatever. Mr. Smith, we could call you that. So welcome to the show. What can we help you with?
Oh, man, Dave, I've seen you in the education, category along with me for a little while now. And so when I saw you were doing a live talk, I was like, I want to come in and meet this guy.
Ah, there we go. What's your show?
I've got a podcast I haven't produced in a while. It's the Growth Farming Podcast. And it's about, building relationships and cultivating self-love within and attracting good things into your life. I hosted a podcast for a long time called the DIY Artist Route. And that was more of an interview show with musicians and entrepreneurs and stuff. I kind of set that aside about 2 or 3 years ago, I think.
Have I met you in Nashville?
I don't know.
At a David Hooper event, maybe? No.
No.
What did you learn? Hey, what'd you learn from those years of doing interviews? Because everybody, I think, approaches interviews pretty different. And if you were thinking about podcasters who do interview shows and you were going to give them maybe a little advice, 1 or 2 things that you learned about interviewing people, what would you say?
Well, just to give a little, backdrop to the podcast, it's been about 22 years in broadcast media. So I worked at a radio station in public radio, and that's really where my interview, prowess came from. And then I just carried it over into doing podcasting. Yeah. But to answer the question, I think doing research on the person that you're going to be talking with and asking questions that are not only, pertinent things for your audience, but also things that you're curious about, so that it's very heartfelt and heart-centered when you're having those conversations. That really carries over in the dialogue that you have. I think all of us have had interview conversations with people where you can tell that they're just rattling off questions, but they don't really actually care about them. And there's a different dynamic that takes place when you're interacting with somebody and it's more of a conversational tone than it is, let me ask you this question, then this question, and that question. Yeah. And that ends up communicating so much more to your audience as well, because then they feel like they're a part of the conversation and not just somebody listening to, somebody rattling off a series of questions just to get through a sound piece or something like that.
I think
Um,
you sense that, or you feel it when the host or the guest interrupt each other, just to be honest. Like, I know we sometimes say
yeah.
like, "Ah, don't do that," but in the normal course of conversation, we do that. And I think it's more genuine when, Dave will say something, and then I have this thing, and I'm like, "No, no, no, we get," you jump in on it, and it creates, I think it creates energy in the interview that you don't get when you just politely, now you don't want to do it every time, right? But when you politely wait and they finish and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's great. I've caught myself doing this." Like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great." And then you move on to the next question, right? That gets a
Yeah.
little,
Yeah.
that gets a little like, "Oh yeah, he's got questions written down," which is not bad, right? It's not bad. None of this stuff is
Mhm.
bad, but I think sometimes I love that you use the word passion in the interview, and you can kind of tell
Mhm.
when someone's passionate about the interview by how excited they get, or even their tone or cadence changes when they
Mhm.
they have a personal aha moment in the interview, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think, going along with what you were just saying about, maybe even sometimes interrupting, there's been times where I've had uh, questions written out that I could foresee that this is where I, thought the conversation might go, or some talking points that I wanted to have and some things I wanted to bring up with the person. But then as I'm getting to actually talk with them and interact with them and hearing, I mean, here's the big deal. I'm a storyteller. That's a big part of what I do. Um, and as my storytelling, I guess, has developed, I recognize that so much of that development actually came from having conversations with people and following their stories as we're having those conversations. And so when, you ask somebody a question and they begin to tell you something about their life that you didn't know anything about, but it's like really inspiring and really interesting, going off the beaten path and just asking those curious questions to build on the story that they're telling you, there might be something inside this person's story or inside this aspect of what they're sharing with you that's so much deeper and so much more powerful and so much more interesting than the stuff that you came up with to talk about. And allowing yourself to go off the beaten path and follow that trail wherever it's going to go could lead to not only an even better conversation and an even better interview, but actually making these really heartfelt connections with that person. And I've experienced that countless times. It's turned into friendships outside of the interview that I didn't know I was going to get to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have like whatever, 5 or 6 questions on I have them on my left side of my desk. I have a piece of paper in front of me with a pen that doesn't click. And I ask the first question and I listen to that answer. And from there, it's like, do I ask a follow-up question or do I go to question number 2 on the sheet? And many times I just listen to what they said and go, oh, wait, well, how did you get involved with such and such? Or what made
Yeah.
this work or whatever? And I always have that piece of paper there. So for some reason, there isn't a follow-up question. I can go back to kind of my game plan. But a lot of times it's, oh, wait, you just said something that, I remember once I was interviewing somebody and in their answer, they said, I know I needed to do something to stand out. And I just wrote down on my piece of paper, stand out, so I could go back to listening. And the minute she was done with her answer, I said, hey, you mentioned that you had to do something to stand out. What did you do to stand out? And so that got into a whole thing of how do you do marketing in a different way? None of that was like, I didn't think we were going to talk about any of that, but it was just a matter of following a little, snippet that
Yeah.
the guest put out. So awesome.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. What's the name of your show?
What do you mean?
Well, you said you're no longer doing the DIY musician. Are you doing a podcast now or?
Not really. I've been kind of sitting on playing with some ideas for doing more episodes, but here on Wisdom, I'm going to be doing a show in about an hour called Storytelling Saturday.
Nice.
And when I come on and thank you, when I come on and I do shows, I'm sharing my original short stories. So what I've been doing for the past 3 months now, I wrote a novel in July and August of this year. That's about I guess it's about the life shift turnaround that happened for it's these 2 boxers. One guy's older and one guy's younger, and it's about a guy recognizing that he's got some deep abandonment and self-love or lack of self-love wounds, and he encounters these experiences where he feels like the whole world is turned against him over and over and over again. And it's not until he gets put in direct contact with the one person that actually beat him in a boxing match to where he's able to turn his life around and see himself differently and take on a different way of thinking and a different way of being, and actually also receiving and understanding what compassion is and what love really looks like and what family dynamic really looks like. And so I'll be reading more from that novel coming up in about an hour.
Cool.
Nice.
Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for being so accommodating and welcoming to me. It's good to meet you, Dave. What's Dave, who's your partner? I didn't hear your name.
Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. He does a show called Home Gadget Geeks.
Oh, awesome. That sounds fun.
It is.
Yeah, we have a good time with it. Yeah, thanks. Take care. Thanks for jumping in.
You too. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
We'll see you.
Dave, we might have a record wisdom day.
I think so. That's holy cow. I know Russ kept coming into the like the backstage area and leaving comments, and I was like, no, the comments need to go on the live
join
part.
Us askthepodcastcoach.com/live is the one.
DR had a question here as we man, I don't know about you, does this seem like it went pretty quick today?
We've got some great guests.
Yeah,
it's been a ton of fun.
What if you're trying to get people on your newsletter? I love Eric K. Johnson's comment on this. He goes, most people don't wake up and go, oh, it's the weekend, it's Saturday, I hope I find some newsletters to sign up for. It's that's where or how do I get them to go to the website? So to go to the newsletter, what do they want? I made a podcast launch checklist. So if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/checklist, you can get a checklist. Because some people I don't know where to start. So it goes back to who's my audience, what do they want, give it to them. And then go to your website. This is where travel bloggers, I'm interviewing Gary Arndt from Everything Everywhere. And he was like a world-class photographer in the travel industry. And as you might imagine, COVID was not kind to him. And so we're talking about how he used podcasting to rebound. But if you have anything on that's remotely visual in your podcast, if you can say, hey, we're talking about this, and I was in I was in Italy, and there was this beautiful little red boat on it, and I took a picture of it, and if you want to see it, it's on the website, mywebsite.com/whatever. That's always a good thing. And anything where it's like I've given you 3/4 of something, which hopefully gets them interested. For more information, go to the website yada.com. So it's you're kind of almost like screening them out. Anybody that heard this should be interested, and they'll go there. And then as you have a service you're trying to sell, there are things you can do without selling. So I had a client of mine, and she said, I'm not getting any speaking gigs. And I went and listened to her podcast, listened to a couple episodes. I said, you never mentioned that you're a speaker. I said, so number one, you have to let people know. And as most people say, I don't want to, I feel salesy when I do that. And I get that, but you have to let people know. And if your talks help people, you're not selling them something, you're helping them. And I said, all you have to do is say, I was speaking at a high school to some kids about such and such last week, and somebody asked this question, and I thought that'd be a good answer. There you go. Now everybody knows that you talk to high school kids. So you don't have to be, this Sunday, I will be speaking at such and such. Should it be one of those for a month and then next month a different one? Boy, that's really up to you. That goes back to,
I don't think so. I think you got to get them in there bunches.
Yeah, that's right. Where if you want to, you can do the website sandwich. Come visit us at askthepodcastcoach.com. You can go out there and be an awesome supporter. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can leave a comment on the blog. Well, everything's there, askthepodcastcoach.com. So it's one call to action.
Right.
Askthepodcastcoach.com. Here's why, because adults love why. When one of the things that just was beat into my head when I was getting my teaching degree is adults love why. Like you can go to a 2-year-old and go 2 + 2 = 4, and they go, okay. And then they run away. You say that to an adult and they're like, wait, how does that work again? You're like, oh, hold on. See, we have 2 apples. Then you had 2 apples. And hold on.
What's the value proposition, right? I mean, why should I do what you're telling me to do?
Yeah.
It's the value proposition.
what happens is when I hear people and they, they're doing their outro music and they're like, hey, that's going to do it for this week. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Dave Jackson. On Facebook, I'm at schoolofpodcasting.com. On Instagram, I'm at schoolofpodcasting.com. And of course, TikTok at schoolofpodcasting.com. Sign up for the newsletter at mywebsite.com. So I'm like, wait, what? And so what Jim is saying is if you repeat that enough, they might remember those episodes. I get that. I just know that if I asked you now, what's my TikTok, you'd be like, Dave Jackson, Dave podcasting. What was it?
Yeah. No,
so
you make a good point there too. You're also shouting at us. So like immediately I'm like, I'm going to stop listening. Cause he's shouting his information at me. Yeah. You make a good point, right? If you just rolling through the CTAs.
Yeah.
That
and I hear that. I mean,
the
one guy had 8 in a row. And I've done that. In fact, I just did an episode a while ago, and I said, "Well, that's 4 calls to action. I think I'll stop here."
Yeah,
It's like just enough.
No, right? I mean, it's an art, like everything else. Of like, how do you do it in a way that doesn't turn off the listeners, but how do you do it also in a way that when they're ready to take on the CTA, they do it.
Right. And the thing is, you have to figure out again, why am I doing this podcast?
Right.
And if it's I want clients. And you go, hey, leave me a rating and review. Is that going to help you get clients? Is that going to put money in your pocket? And I'm like, no, it's social proof. In the event you're going for advertising and they want proof that you have an audience. Is that what you're doing? No, I'm trying to get clients. Well, in that case, please rate and review me. Don't. That's a waste of a call to action. So that's the one that always gets me. I'm like, really? It's okay. And remember, please, that 70% of Europe is on Android, not Apple. So when you just pimp Apple, and more Apple, okay, And also, when you're promoting stamps.com, 70% of your audiences, or however many percent is in Europe, is going, I don't want stamps.com. I don't go to the post office. So it's always fun.
Well, and apparently we need to add my name. I learned this week we need to add my name to the Wisdom app so they know they're getting both of us.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out, change my name to Dave
Is there a
Jackson's
description? Like when you start there may also be this other voice because they don't see like
no, they just
great example of
they just see my blinking head.
Yeah, they just see you. This is a great example though of fit and finish or in UI development is we're thinking like the Wisdom listeners are assuming they're getting you, and who pipes a show into Wisdom? That's not what it's designed for, right? It's designed for one-on-one communication.
Well, what I should do is it says it just says ask the podcast coach. So what I need to do is expand on that and put like ask the podcast coach with Dave Jackson and Jim Collison. Yeah, that kind of thing. And
that'd probably be a good way to, just so folks are like, who's that other voice? Like, that's weird. That doesn't sound like Dave Jackson.
It's Dave Jackson. It's multiple personality theater. Come on. I'm a schizophrenic, and so how's that go? Roses are red.
We shouldn't joke about that stuff. We shouldn't joke about we shouldn't joke about that stuff.
Here's the interesting thing. Let's take we're out of time. But
are we in podcasting, Dave? Are we really ever out of time? We're
out of tape. Sorry. I always love that. But I think it's interesting on a completely unrelated thing. And then I do have a recommendation. Is 6 months ago, if we would have all been making fun of Kanye West, we would have been shamed because he has, personality issues. And now I've heard multiple people call him crazy. And I was like, wait, are we allowed to use the word crazy again?
No, we shouldn't.
That's crazy.
We shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. But as we do get ready to walk out the door here, if you are this has nothing to do with podcasting, but it does have to do, actually it does. I will tie this into podcasting. The new A Christmas Story Christmas on HBO with Ralphie and all that. I didn't realize this. There was A Christmas Story 2, which was an obvious money grab with no thought to it, but it was quick and easy and it was horrible. This one, 30 years later, so well done without just redoing the first movie. And you have to watch it to the end. The end is like, it was just great. And if you like credits, they take screenshots from the old movie and put it right next to the new movie. because you don't realize it, but they were doing some scenes very similar. So that's my pick of the week if you're looking for some holiday movies. It's on HBO. Also, the Weird Al movie is available. I didn't realize this. You can watch the movie on Roku without having a Roku. And that was silly and fun. So, Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, I took the week off, but if you want to go to the live page right now, theaverageguy.tv/live, Dave Hamilton, the other Dave in my life from Mac Geek Gab, is on. And we spend a whole bunch of time thinking and talking about kind of the Apple infrastructure and where it's going and, some of those kinds of things. So even if you're not an Apple guy, it's a fun interview. So head out there. Today, the CTA a little bit different. theaverageguy.tv/live.
Very good. And on the School of Podcasting, Jim, you're going to love this because what have you been saying is the way to grow your show for a little while now. You're like, I think it's coming down to this. Do you know your own answer?
Yeah. For me, it's to help people.
Well, help people, but in terms of promoting it, you've been saying, I think we're going to have to start paying for promotion.
Oh, yeah.
And
for sure.
we talk about this week on the School of Podcasting, but we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.